Perlito is complicated enough where you need to have entire presentation about just that. Probably with all of these, you could have entire presentations, of course, about just their nature and overview even. But with Perlito, it can output JavaScript, it can output Java. It has a modular backend, so it could output other languages as well, if you're interested in that. And it can do other things as well. It can also do some Perl 6 stuff that we'll mention. So Perlito, very interesting project. I'm sure that it will continue to evolve. And the way that this was implemented was Flavio, again, did not use, in this case, that pumpkin code. This does not come from that C89 code. This was Flavio he just wrote his own Perl parser. He wrote his own code generator, and he made the semantic actions match up with what the pumpkin would do, and which I've also done that, and I'll mention later with my project. But I can appreciate that's not exactly a trivial thing, and one of the things that Flavio mentioned to me, I'll just say in closing on this project, is that the first 90 or whatever large percentage of the functionality of Perl 5, because it's a dynamic language, maps quite well to JavaScript because it's also a dynamic language. So the main basic popular features of Perl 5 can be compiled into JavaScript, and it will run at about the same speed as normal JavaScript. So there's not a lot of overhead. It translates one-to-one, so to speak. But the last 10% or 5% or the last complicated high magic edge cases of Perl 5, when he got to that point and implemented those parts, which good for him that he did it, but it slowed everything down a lot, or at least it slowed those parts down and potentially other parts as well, because the semantics don't match. This is why compiling from one language into another is never exactly trivial, because those languages were designed with different things in mind by different language designers, and even though some of their core concepts may be the same, all the edge cases don't match. And so you're never going to have a clean, straight compile from one language to another. It just doesn't work unless you're using one language to implement the other from scratch. But that's not exactly what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about translating from one language to another. So if you're translating, in this case, so to speak, from Perl 5 into JavaScript with Perlito, then all of those edge cases or high magic parts of Perl 5 will not match, and so you end up with something that cannot run at the speed of regular JavaScript. It's going to be far slower for those special cases. And of course, you don't have the ability to run most anything off of CPAN because it all uses XS code, and that's all C code and other wacky C compiled linkable this and that. And we're talking about it has to be inside of a JavaScript sandbox. And so because of that, you are, I think, mostly limited to pure Perl. Now, Flavio may be adding ways to get around that, and we'll kind of circle back to that as well in a minute, but I'll stop there on Perlito because there's a lot of other stuff to cover here. RPerl, yes. I created RPerl. I'm the pump king of RPerl. And this is the restricted Perl compiler. My goal is not to start with all of that fast stuff that I just mentioned that ruined Flavio's day. I'm saying I can do without it, at least for the time being, because I am really focused on the performance and speed. So RPerl, as many of you know, translates or compiles your Perl 5 input code into C++. And then that C++ is magically linked back in to the Perl again, because Perl is written in C, and C and C++ can be linked together easily. And you end up with super fast code. This is RPerl is the fastest compiler in the world. It It can equal the speed of C, C++, and Fortran in serial, but we also added automatic parallelization. So this is something that essentially is gone faster than your traditional compiled languages. So we're presenting our Perl as the world's fastest compiler. Now, it does not, as I said, have all of those edge cases of Perl 5. So if you really have to use the spaceship operator, okay, which is a secret operator in Perl 5, then you may be out of luck because we just have not gotten around to implementing that level of wacky, weird edge case magic. But if you're just trying to run some, loops and calculate some numbers and make some classes, we can do that already, and you can even link up to databases stuff and scientific libraries, and we've done quite a bit of work on our Perl. Come back in 2 days and we'll tell you more about that. But this is the Perl compiler, okay? The Pumpkin is the Perl interpreter, Perl 5 interpreter, and our Perl is the Perl 5 compiler. P2, created by Rainey Urban. Rainey, Ingy, and myself met together in 2012, formed something called Perl 11. Again, we'll circle back to that if you haven't heard of it. But we all kind of created our own projects, and one of Rainey's projects was P2. This is based off of a virtual machine called Potion by a programmer called Why the Lucky Stiff, who disappeared off the internet a while back. But the virtual machine Potion is a very small and fast virtual machine that may be close enough to the Perl semantics to be useful for re-implementing Perl 5 and potentially Perl 6 in a single unified code base that's running off of, again, a single small virtual machine, in this case Potion. Now, I remain skeptical about this until it gets a bit further along, but if anybody had $1 million and wanted to investigate something that could really reunify Perl, this would be one of those projects. I am not an active member of that, but I am friends with Rainey, and he is still thinking about it, if not writing code on it today, but he's still writing other Perl code that we'll mention right now. Rainey also created C Perl. Yes, Rainey is double talented, I guess. He's given double credited in this presentation. C Perl is a fork, as you can see, again, of that C89 code, the Pumpkin. But it has a couple hundred upgrades or updates, patches that Rainey had written that did not get applied to the mainstream Perl for one reason or another, mostly interpersonal disagreements, which I won't get into or pick sides on, but I will present this as a legitimate edition of Perl, and it very well may run your complicated Perl code base off of CPAN 5 or 10 or even 20% faster than it's running right now with the Pumpkin. So if you've got to have a Perl interpreter that is mostly compatible with everything that's out there that the Pumpkin can run, then you can try this out. Now, there may be some edge cases that don't work. You can contact Rainey. I know that he's updating this regularly, so he is active on this project. And again, if you had, one of your 100 lucky wishes, you could wish for C Perl and Pumpkin to get re-merged back together again, and so we don't have forks of the interpreter for no reason. But for now, we do, and C Perl does actually have an existence and a value. Web Perl, this is a very interesting one. Boy, this mic stand just keeps moving down slowly. Web Perl, recently created by Dauke Hampfling in Germany. And Hauke Dampfling, I'm trying to make sure Hauke Dampfling in Germany. Sorry, if I said your name wrong, Hauke. Hauke created WebPerl. This is sort of like Perlito, but different. in a very important way. This still runs in your browser. Perlito and WebPerl both run in your browser. But WebPerl comes from the Pumpkin. It's a recompiled edition of that same C89 code. It's recompiled to run inside the browser using WebAssembly. Super cool. This is really a neato thing, and I'm sure that we might see Flavio thinking about that with Perlito at some point, or maybe they'll get merged, or who knows what. But essentially, what Hauke did with WebPerl is he took the Perl 5 makefile and the config files, and he rewrote them or massively upgraded and refactored those build files to work with Clang, which is a compiler that can emit code in WebAssembly. And WebAssembly is a new web standard language that can run inside of the latest modern browsers. I know it runs in Google and probably Firefox, if not soon. Who knows about the others? And that is so incredibly fast that the idea is anything that's compiled into WebAssembly is going to be running at close to or at a native speed. So you can have applications that are running at the speed of a desktop application, but inside the web browser. And we already have seen this with the very fast JavaScript engines that Google has built, such as V8 and so forth, and also the fast engines in the other browsers. But you're still having to lock yourself into JavaScript. And this is not the JavaScript conference. This is the Perl conference. So we want to be able to use Perl to program in web browsers and on wristwatches and in spaceships or whatever. So when we're programming in web browsers, we can actually have close to all of the power of the Perl 5 interpreter, including to some degree or another the ability to load CPAN modules, because if there's a CPAN module that needs its XS code recompiled, well, you may have some manual labor in upgrading that build file, like Hauke had to do, but you will have a pathway to actually running arbitrary CPAN modules, total high magic, 100% high magic, because it comes off the Pumpkin directly in your browser at native or near native speed. So at essentially at the speed of what you would get of running the Perl binary directly. It's pretty cool. Okay, we're just past halfway here. And there's a whole other half of the family tree that I'm going to move through a little bit quicker. I'm somewhat less of an expert on Perl 6 because I'm not a Perl 6 programmer. But I do love the Perl 6 community, and I'm good friends with Wendy and Liz and Dr. Four and a lot of those Perl 6 people. So I've been learning all about that as well. So St. Larry was